disturbing your Saturday. The UK's plan against COVID has been working. We've had the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe and now the fastest booster campaign in Europe, with almost 16.8 million boosters in people's arms. And though case numbers have remained relatively high, we're seeing falling hospitalizations and falling numbers of deaths. But on Wednesday, we received news of a new variant, the so-called Omicron variant, and I want to express my deep gratitude to scientists in South Africa who identified this new variant and shared the information widely and immediately. This variant is spreading around the world, with 2 cases so far identified here in the UK. As always, I must stress this, as always with a new variant, there are many things that we just cannot know at this early stage, but our scientists are learning more hour by hour. And it does appear that Omicron spreads very rapidly and can be spread between people who are double vaccinated. There is also a very extensive mutation, which means it diverges quite significantly from previous configurations of the virus. And as a result, it might, at least in part, reduce the protection of our vaccines over time. So we need to take targeted and proportionate measures now as a precaution while we find out more. And first, we need to slow down the seeding of this variant in our country. We need to buy time for our scientists to understand exactly what we're dealing with, and for us to get more people vaccinated, and above all, to get more people boosted, as well as to help our NHS prepare in what is already a challenging winter. So yesterday, we took steps to protect the UK against the variant coming here from southern African countries, and earlier today added 4 more countries to the red list. But we now need to go further and implement a proportionate testing regime for arrivals from across the whole world. So we're not going to stop people traveling. I want to stress that we're not going to stop people traveling, but we will require anyone who enters the UK to take a PCR test by the end of the 2nd day after their arrival, and to self-isolate until they have a negative result. Second, we need to slow down the spread of this variant here in the UK, because measures at the border can only ever minimize and delay the arrival of a new variant rather than stop it altogether. So in addition to the measures we're already taking to locate those who have been in countries of concern over the last 10 days, we will require all contacts of those who test positive with a suspected case of Omicron to self-isolate for 10 days, regardless of your vaccination status. We will also go further in asking all of you to help contain the spread of this variant by tightening up the rules on face coverings in shops and on public transport. And third, and most importantly, we need to bolster our protections against this new variant. We don't yet exactly know how effective our vaccines will be against Omicron, but we have good reasons for believing they will provide at least some measure of protection. And if you're boosted, your response is likely to be stronger. So it's more vital than ever that people get their jabs and we get those boosters into arms as fast as possible. So from today, we're going to boost the booster campaign. We're already planning to do 6 million jabs in England alone over the next 3 weeks. And now we're looking to go further. So the Health Secretary has asked the JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, to consider giving boosters to as wide a group as possible, as well as reducing the gap between your second dose and your booster. And of course, we're speaking to our counterparts in the devolved administrations and will continue to coordinate with them. The measures that we're taking today, including on our borders and on face masks, are temporary and precautionary, and we will review them in 3 weeks. At that point, we should have much greater information about the continuing effectiveness of our vaccines. I very much hope that we will find that we continue to be in a strong position and we can lift these measures again. But right now, this is the responsible course of action to slow down the seeding and the spread of this new variant and to maximize our defenses so that we protect the gains we've worked for so hard and so that we can continue to save lives. Thank you. I'm going to ask Chris to do the slides.
Thank you much, Prime Minister. First slide, please. We thought it was sensible to start off with the existing situation, which is almost entirely Delta, because that is the problem for people who are currently being infected, currently in hospital and currently dying. It isn't to say that Delta is worse than Omicron, it is simply to say this is what the majority, by far the majority of cases at the moment are. So if we look at the current situation, the situation remains that in terms of numbers of cases, overall, it is, in our view, broadly flat. Sometimes it is going up and sometimes it is going down. It went up, for example, yesterday in terms of numbers of cases, but that hides the fact that, in fact, there are three different patterns. In younger children, there is quite significant transmission at this point in time, and rates are increasing in many parts of the country. At the other end of the age spectrum, as a result of the booster program, almost certainly, rates are beginning to drift downwards in people over 60 and particularly people above 70. And the result of that is that we're seeing an improvement in the group who are most vulnerable. And then between those ages, I would say broadly, the rates are flat. They're slightly higher in certain ages and slightly lower in others. But those are really broadly the three patterns. Next slide, please. As a result of the fact that the numbers in the older age groups and vulnerable people are getting their booster vaccination, the numbers going into hospital, despite the high and in some areas rising overall numbers, the numbers going to hospital are gradually decreasing. This is not a sudden drop, this is a gradual drifting down, but if the numbers overall remain roughly as they are, we should hope that this should continue to be the case as the booster campaign, which is very successful, very large numbers of people coming forward, continues to provide significant additional protection to people over the next weeks. Next slide, please. And this is fortunately translating again into a gradual reduction in the number of people who are dying of COVID. Next slide, please. Looking at the vaccination program that the Prime Minister talked about, we're continuing to see increases in the number of people coming forward for their first vaccine and also people coming forward for their second vaccine as part of their primary course. And that is absolutely essential. Anybody who is not vaccinated can, I please strongly encourage you to do so. The rates are already very high with Delta, and we now have this new risk coming through. Next slide, please. And when we look at the booster program, the rates of this are going very well at the moment. As you can see, day by day, the number of people who are getting this significant additional protection from the booster are increasing. So that's the summary in terms of the overall epidemic. Now just moving on to a few additional facts on the Omicron variant, just to add to what the Prime Minister has said. We know that there are cases have been seen out of 4 countries in Southern Africa, not just South Africa. And we know that they've been imported into several countries around the world, including Hong Kong, which reported one of the first cases, Belgium, and most recent report suggesting Germany, and now in the UK. We expect the numbers to continue to rise around the world over the next few days. That is our very strong expectation, and the numbers of countries that will be reporting this will continue to rise. That is, I think, virtually inevitable. Here in the UK, as the Prime Minister says, there are 2 cases that have been formally reported, the first in Essex and the second in Nottingham, both of those are linked together. So they're part of the same cluster. These are not independent cases. They're part of the same cluster. They are helping all the public health authorities. They are self-isolating, and there is contact tracing going on by the UK Health Security Agency around all of these. I just wanted to say a little bit about how the virus, with the reason that we are concerned about this virus, and essentially it is, as the Prime Minister said, two different things. The first question is a virus capable of spreading? And this one is spreading rapidly in many areas. So, for example, in the Gauteng area of South Africa, up to 90% of the cases that have been reported and genotyped we are told are of this new variant. So spread is clear, and it's spreading around the world. So to achieve the first thing, it definitely can spread. Second question is, to what extent is that because it is able to escape immunity from prior infection or from vaccination? We do not at this stage know, but what we do know is that there are quite extensive mutations on the spike protein, which is an important part of the virus. And the reason that is important is that is the bit which all the vaccines are against, and indeed which most natural immunity is against. So there is a reasonable chance that at least there will be some degree of vaccine escape with this variant. Now, an important thing which we've said previously with other bits of immunity with viruses is that it is easier for the virus to achieve ability to escape for infection than it is to achieve escape for severe disease and then on to mortality. So there is a reasonable chance, but I want to be clear, we need to wait until we have data before we can say this with any certainty, that even if there is some or significant escape from the ability to infect someone, and therefore for them to be infectious, it may be that there's still vaccines, in particular when they've had boosters, and natural infection boosted by vaccination may be sufficient to go on, prevent people from going on to having severe disease and in some cases dying. So that is the reason that the Prime Minister has emphasised so strongly the need to boost on top of a primary course, because the stronger the immune system response, the more it is able to deal with a relative disadvantage due to the genetic makeup of this virus. I'm now going to pass over to Sir Patrick, who's going to add to those points.
So viruses will continue to change, and they change all the time. There have been many variants. The reason this one is worrying, as Chris has said, is the combination of transmissibility and the potential for some degree of escape from vaccines because of the number of changes. That means, therefore, there are three things that need to be done, as the Prime Minister has said. The first is to try to limit the number of cases that enter the country from places that have got lots of cases, and that means trying to detect people and prevent them from spreading in the country. The second is to make sure that when we do have cases in the country, and we will have cases, just as other countries will have, that we try and limit spread in the country. And that means detecting those cases, making sure the contacts are identified and that clusters are identified and contained. And the third is to bolster our defences. And the defences are first and foremost to make sure that the vaccines are boosted, because very high levels of antibody coverage will create a higher proportion of people protected even against a variant. And secondly, to make sure also that we've got the antivirals that are coming along, which won't be susceptible to the same degree of resistance to this particular set of changes. So defences are the third important part of this as we go into this next phase. But at the moment, there are few cases. They need to be identified. They need to be properly looked after in terms of contact tracing, and we need to make sure that we reduce spread.
Thank you very much, Chris and Patrick. Let's go to the media. Ian Watson, BBC.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I think we were all hoping that we were seeing the beginning of the end of the pandemic, but I think people will be concerned listening to you today that we're actually seeing the beginning of new restrictions. You've said they'll be reviewed in 3 weeks' time. How likely is it that those restrictions could be ratcheted up in 3 weeks' time rather than wound down? And can you say with any confidence at the moment that people can keep their Christmas plans? And if I may ask Sir Patrick, you said at a previous press conference that you have to go hard and you have to go early. Arguably, you're going early, but not hard. This is falling short of full Plan B with advice to work from home, vaccine passports, and so on. Have people amongst your sage advisors been pushing for full Plan B now? And if not, why not? And finally, Professor Whitty, if you could answer this. The government is going much quicker this time than it did over Delta. Is that because you're learning lessons from the pandemic, or is it because you really are far more scared about this variant than the one that's currently prevalent? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Just on your very good point about is this, are we going hard enough? Why aren't we doing Plan B? I think the key thing to understand is that you've got two variants in play here, and they require a different approach. So what we're doing we think that the measures we have are right for dealing with Delta and they're proportionate and right. You've heard from Chris about the what's happening with case numbers and also with hospitalizations with the measures we have in place. And we think that this is the right approach to Omicron, given the uncertainties that we have and the need to take a precautionary approach with an incoming variant from elsewhere, about which we simply don't yet know enough. So it's two different variants that require two simultaneous strategies, if you like. And on your point about where we are overall in the pandemic, I think I would just repeat what I said at the beginning, that I think the UK continues to be in a much stronger position. We continue to be in a strong position, largely thanks to the speed of the vaccine rollout and now the booster rollout. And as for your question about Christmas, I think I'm going to stick with the formula I've used before, which is that I'm pretty confident, or absolutely confident, this Christmas will be considerably better than last Christmas. If that will do for the time being on that one. Patrick.
I mean, you're quite right. The thing that we need to do is always think, in the face of this virus, go earlier than you think you want to, harder than you think you want to, and more geographically broad than you think you want to. Those are the principles. And that remains true here. But of course, the specifics of this are different, because this isn't now a widespread variant in the UK. It's one that's coming in. Therefore, we need to make sure we've got the right measures in place to detect it. We need to make sure we can pick up the clusters in the country as quickly as possible, contain those, and to make sure that we've got contact tracing and isolation of contacts. And importantly, we must boost the defenses that we have, which is why booster vaccines are so important, and go really hard and quick to get those booster vaccines across as many people as possible, reinforce the need that anyone who hasn't had a vaccine should get it. Anyone who's eligible for a booster now and hasn't had it should get it, because that's going to give the high antibody levels and the high response, which stands the best chance of actually stopping this from causing problems in terms of severe disease and deaths.
Thank you. It's a question you asked me. I mean, I think we're learning lessons the whole time. I think it is important, though, to stress that the risk here is different to Delta. Delta, it was primarily driven by the ability to spread really rapidly, but less concern about the vaccination escape. This one here, really the biggest thing that is leading us to wish to move rapidly is to do with the at least strong theoretical reasons for thinking that some degree of vaccine escape is likely, given the number of mutations. But there's obviously a much longer answer than that.
Thank you. Nick Martin, Sky.
Good evening, everyone. Just firstly to you, Prime Minister, can you just be a bit clearer about what you said about face coverings? You said it would be necessary to tighten up on them. Are you tonight saying that you are going to make face coverings mandatory in whatever indoor spaces? And just to Professor Valence, Sir Patrick and Professor Whitty, have you modelled the potential spread of this new variant over the next few weeks and months? What picture does that show? And can we really rule out lockdowns as a result of what you know about this variant?
Nick, thank you very much. On face coverings, what we're looking at is retail and transport. Just going back to a position where you have to wear them in retail settings or on public transport. But the Health Secretary, Saj, will be setting out more in the course of the next day or so.
In terms of the modelling of this, in order to model, you need some information around the increased degree of transmissibility or otherwise, and that's still being collected. So we don't yet have enough information to know exactly whether this is more transmissible, if so, by how much. What we do know from South Africa, and Chris has alluded to this, is there are pockets of rapidly growing outbreaks, but that's a rather different situation. So we're trying to get that information. I have to say the South African scientists have been absolutely brilliant. They've been brilliant at detecting it. They've been brilliant at sharing that information, and that's been very helpful to the whole world, actually. So I think we'll get more information on transmissibility. We'll get more information on the ability of of the vaccines to protect against the virus, but that's going to take a little bit of time. And so at the moment, I'm afraid the models are more sort of, if it spreads very fast, of course, it's going to spread very fast and go into a lot of places. And if it spreads less fast, it's going to do so less. We can't really get much further than that. But if it's very transmissible and obviously does cause big escape, then clearly that's a major issue to face up to. But that isn't what we know at the moment. We need to get that information.
Great, thanks. Vincent McCaveney, ITV News.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, there'll be people watching this wondering why you're not going further into Plan B and ordering people to work from home, if that might help us actually have something towards a normal Christmas and reduce the spread. Also, things like having vaccine passports and using the check-in apps once again. So why aren't you doing that at this point? Also for you, there have been calls over the last year for developed nations to help more developing nations roll out the vaccine. Is this now evidence that we should have done more in the past year to do that with international partners? And for Sir Patrick and Professor Whitty, on the vaccination scheme, you said you're going to boost the booster rollout. What does that mean? Is the age going to come down? And for vaccinations for those under 12 and second vaccinations for those aged 12 to 15, are we going to see that coming shortly as well? Thank you.
Thanks. A very, very important point, Vincent. But I want to go back to what I was saying about the difference between Delta and Omicron and the need to have slightly different tactics to cope with them. When you look at Delta, the measures that we have in place are effective in the sense that you're seeing this downwards tracking of hospitalizations and deaths, assisted by the booster program and by the massive take-up of vaccines. And that's the key takeout, I hope, from this briefing today, is that the best way to beat this piece of news is for everybody to get their booster. But for Omicron, what you need to do is to try to slow the seeding with the border measures that we're taking, the tough measures that we're taking at the border, in order to give us time to find out exactly what the risk is, but more importantly, to allow that booster program, give us time to have another 6 million boosters in people's arms, and we think that would be very valuable. And so you had a second question. Forgive me.
There've been many calls to help developing nations.
Yes, I'm sorry. On vaccines around the world, that is something that I think the UK can be incredibly proud of, and we've done a huge amount to vaccinate the world. Don't forget that 1.5 billion doses have been delivered at cost, thanks to the deal the UK government did with AstraZeneca. And I think when you look at the arrival of and the spread of Omicron, sadly it's been in countries where the problem has not been supply of vaccine. It's been really to do with hesitancy and lack of take up. So I think that there might be many. We do need to do more to vaccinate the world. The UK has been leading in that, but I don't think. I mean, I defer to Chris and Patrick. I don't think that is the issue here.
On the question you asked about extending the numbers, so the Joint Committee on Vaccination Immunisation, JCVI, which gives the advice to the government, is taking into account the fact this really changes the risks-benefit calculations for several of the decisions which they still have to take, which includes extending down in the age range into younger adults, for example, for boosters. So they will reassess decisions they've taken and decide whether, in the light of this new information, and they'll do this rapidly, in the light of this new information, they wish to advise an extension beyond the groups that are there already.
I've got nothing.
Great, thanks. David Maddox, Sunday Express.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Can you, a question for all three of you really, can you be clear to people about your level of concern compared to the Delta variant last year? And is it that the circumstances have changed so much that we can be less concerned than this time last year? And can you appreciate that given how rapidly things developed last year, that people will be worried, especially the hospitality industry, about Christmas? Should people in that industry and should others be taking precautionary measures at this point on that basis? Regarding the JCVI review of vaccines, can you give some more of a rationale to extending it downwards, given that there is a significant group of parents who are worried about the effect of vaccines on children, and the evidence so far that suggests that children aren't as badly affected by the virus as other age groups? And finally, on vaccine passports, what is the likelihood of those being introduced? And are you looking at the outcomes in Scotland, which suggest that it hasn't had an impact so far on the spread of the virus?
Thank you very much, David. I think I'm going to ask Chris and Patrick to comment on vaccination of younger people and vaccination of children in particular. But just on your point about hospitality, as you'll have seen, there's nothing that we've announced tonight that changes the position for hospitality. And I'm just going to repeat what I've said. I believe that as a result of the vaccination program and of the booster program that is going very, very fast now, that the UK is in a much, much stronger position. And it's in order to retain that strong position that we're taking the sensible precautionary steps that we're taking today. And I continue to, I repeat what I said about my formula about Christmas, that I have every reason to think that it will be considerably better, David, than last year.
On the JCVI question, so there are broadly three sets of questions they're going to look at. The first one is actually extending down in adults, down to people 18 for a booster vaccination. And I do think that's probably the most urgent of the decisions they will have to take. There's then a question about a second dose for children who've chosen to take children whose families have chosen to take the first dose, and those aged 12 to 15. They've already decided that this should be extended to young people 16 and 17. The evidence on that, I think, is broadly been, as evidence has come in, it has made us more reassured about safety rather than less reassured about safety. So, we are, I think most parents would agree that there are now significant outbreaks amongst those who are not vaccinated in schools. Indeed, amongst some who are vaccinated, there is a significant issue in children of that age, and that therefore clearly should be looked at by JCVI. And then they will look additionally at the younger age groups, and they will take a view as to whether they think the evidence is clear enough. Obviously, some countries like the USA have already decided to go in that direction, but JCVI are an independent committee. They will take the decision based on the science that's in front of them. But to go back to this point about, were we more concerned or less concerned? The point we have at the moment is there's a lot of uncertainty about the new Omicron variant. And because of that uncertainty, it is sensible to take a precautionary approach until we know which way things are going, and do that rather than look back and wish we'd done so before.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I mean, I think the one thing that I think makes people concerned, and that's why there's so much interest in this, is the number of mutations and the way in which that might change the immune system's recognition of the virus, which is how you get vaccine escape. So that's why people are concerned about this. But as Chris said, there's huge uncertainty about exactly how that translates into protection, and that's what needs to be looked at. Reasons to be overall much less concerned in the long run is because we've got vaccines that are effective. The vaccine manufacturers actually can change them quite easily. So we've got a very changeable platform of vaccines now, and we've got drugs coming along, antiviral drugs, which work. So we've got a far greater armamentarium than we had months ago, and certainly in a totally transformed picture compared to a year ago.
I certainly agree with that. David Wooding's son.
Prime Minister, I want to push you a little bit more on Christmas, please, because it's the thing which is at the forefront of our minds. I take your view that we'll have a better Christmas, and I'm glad to hear that. But can you, for the sake of you people watching and for our readers, say how important it is to use these mitigations, wearing your mask and all the other things, in order to have a good Christmas this year? Could I also ask a couple of your two experts? Professor Whitty, you mentioned that some people might have a bit of fatigue about abiding by the restrictions after 2 years of this. Do you think that there'll be any problems in that area with this new variant as we try to get people back into some more restricted lifestyle? And Sir Patrick, how long do you think it would take to get a vaccine tweaked that might be able to deal with this once we taking into account we need to have the fact before we do that? And secondly, the amateur scientists among us were saying a couple of days ago when we first heard about this variant that if it's there, it's already in Britain, and so it came to pass that it is. So will the amateur scientists now thinking, oh gosh, it's going to be spreading through Britain rapidly, it'll let rip before long? Is that something we need to fear about, or how can you calm us down on that one? Thank you.
So David, I just really to repeat what I've said before. The thing about, as Chris and Patrick have said, it is pretty clear that if you're no matter what the effects of this new variant, if you're vaccinated in particular, if you have a booster, your immune response is likely to be stronger. So the best thing you can do, best thing everybody can do, is get your booster, and the stronger the overall position will all be in. As I say, as we go forward to Christmas, we are in a strong position, but the objective of what we're doing tonight is to keep that position strong.
In the question you asked me, I mean, I was puzzled by some of the headlines I read of what I said this morning, because they bore no relationship, in my view, to what I actually said. But that sometimes happens. I'm sure it doesn't happen under any of your watches. And what I said was, asking a rhetorical question, the UK public have been absolutely extraordinary at responding when they have it explained to them why to do it. And my point, and my central point, was only, if you're going to ask people to do something, lay out all the data very clearly, explain it very honestly, and so that people understand why it is that you're asking something to do something. That was the point I was making. Quite how it turned into what it was reported as, I don't fully understand, but I mean, that was the point. And if I can make one Christmas plea, it would be that when people raise their glasses at Christmas, they do so to the extraordinary scientists who've produced the vaccines, the diagnostics, the drugs, which will allow this Christmas, as the Prime Minister said, to be in a very different place to what it would have been without them.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
On the question about vaccines and how long it would take, I think it's important to recognise there are three ways in which this can be done, and the companies are all thinking about this. The first is that boosters will give high enough antibody coverage that actually that's going to be enough to cover this. That's the first situation, and needs to be tested, but that looks like something that anyway is going to give protection. Whether there's more needed on top of that, we'll have to see. The second is that vaccine manufacturers have been producing broader vaccines anyway to get broader coverage across potential new variants. So those are in the pipeline. And then a couple of companies have already said they could tweak their existing vaccines and get a new vaccine out specifically against this in about 100 days. And so those are the sort of three scenarios. Clearly, the one which is the one to really go for now is boost, because it is the case that as you keep boosting with the vaccine, you get slightly broader coverage because the immune system knows it needs to get broader. And because the antibody levels are so high, it actually causes enough coverage of other variants to be effective. So I think that's really why the boosting is so important. The spread of the variant, I mean, the amateur scientists were in line with the professional scientists, which is you're not going to stop these things from going around the world. And we've seen that time and time again. New variants that have significant transmissibility advantage will spread. So the question on this one is, does it have significant transmissibility advantage? Those data are being looked at and collected. So we do expect it to spread. You can delay the spread by actions you won't stop it. And you can see that now Delta is pretty much everywhere. And depending on what Omicron does in terms of its transmissibility, it might either spread or it gets halted because Delta outcompetes it. And we just don't know yet.
Thanks. Hugo Guy, the I.
Thank you. Can I press you, Prime Minister, on the question of the JCVI? Are you hoping that they'll report back on whether or not to broaden boosters by the end of this coming week, or is it going to take a bit longer than that? And can I ask Professor Whitty, when do you expect antiviral treatments such as molnupiravir and Paxlovid, which the UK already has on order, to be deployed in the NHS for the first time?
Hugo, thanks very much. A good question about the JCVI, but they are an independent body, and but clearly we hope that we'll get some answers for everybody as soon as possible. But
on the antivirals, I mean, and Sir Patrick may want to add to this, but on the antivirals, we are going to have to do a bit of a rethink in the basis of this new variant, just to be confident we got the right indications for it, because there are a variety of ways you could use it in different ways. And what we need to make sure is that whatever stock we've got of these, what appear to be highly effective drugs, that we use in the most effective way and for the right people. Because where you are in the pathway right from the very beginning, when people as prophylaxis all the way through to treating people in intensive care, working out their place, we do need to think through. And I think we probably need to do a rethink of it, just to make sure that with the new variant, we're actually targeting in the right direction.
good, thanks. Have we got Will James from Will?
Yes, that's me. Yes. Was it a mistake not to close the borders sooner, or rather tighten the travel restrictions? And will you be considering adding countries like Belgium and others where the Omicron variant's been reported to the red list?
Thanks, Will. Well, thank you very much. Listen, I really don't know how we could have acted faster. We got the news on. I was told about it on, I think, Thursday, and we closed we put quite a lot of Southern African countries on the red list yesterday, some more today, and what we're announcing is some tough measures for I'm afraid for everybody traveling, so that you have to do a PCR test as soon as you get back here, and you've got to isolate for 48 hours until you get a negative result. And I'm afraid that may sound tough, but that is just the way it's got to be. Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you. It's between